All right. Welcome to episode 3 of the Emergency Goalies. Uh, Pretty eventful week. And I'm going to kick it to Michael for a little recap of the week's action.
Yeah, so last week on the show, we had very minimal action to go over. It was just a two-game week previously, but the Blackhawks kicked off um, a 7-game, and I think it's like 13 days or something like that. And that started off last Thursday against Arizona, which also marked the return of Corey Crawford after I think it was nearly 10 months or just over 10 months. I can't remember which one, but boy, he kind of looked like he didn't miss a beat, really. The Blackhawks did drop that game 4-1. Crawford only gave up 3 of the goals. There was an empty netter at the end, but he played really well. Not a perfect game from him, but, certainly considering the layoff he was coming off of, a very successful return. Wasn't a great game for the Hawks overall, but they actually did play better than the score indicated. It was basically a goalie win by Antti Ranta, our former friend. But yeah, he really had the Hawks number in that one. And those games are going to happen. Arizona had only scored 3 goals in their first 5 games or something, and they were due. They got a couple of 2-on-1s, and then also a breakaway against Crawford, and that was really the only goals they scored against him. The actual zone time that Arizona got, he really shut them down in those scenarios. So there's not too much more I want to go over with that game. So then 2 nights later, they started off a back-to-back weekend. First on the road against Columbus, where it was kind of a flip-flop of the scenario against Arizona, where the Hawks won 4-1. And this was a goalie win as well, but this time it was Crawford that came out on top. The Blackhawks were actually outplayed. I'm not going to say handily, but the game was definitely tipped in the Blue Jackets' favor. But Crawford was just outstanding in the game. And the Hawks got a couple of goals by Patrick Kane late to kind of give them some separation. But it had been a really tight game prior to that. DeBrincat had gotten the first goal. It was his 7th goal in the first seven games, so he continued his hot streak. Alexander Fortin looked like maybe he had gotten his first career goal for the second goal, but Marcus Kruger had actually tipped the puck in. So Fortin did get an assist anyway, his first point, but that had ended up being a big goal in the game. And then, like I said, Kane capped it off with 2 goals in the third period, and Crawford just shut him down at the end. And but then things got even worse. The cracks were showing a little bit in that Columbus game, like I said, outplayed. And then come the next night, back home in Chicago, they took on the Tampa Bay Lightning, and yikes. This was probably the worst game the Blackhawks have played in a very long time. They were thoroughly dominated pretty much from the opening puck drop. It was actually 1-1 after the first period, I think. Crawford was playing well. But the play was certainly in Tampa Bay's favor. But then the second period, what a nightmare that was. I think it ended up being 33-5 5 shots on goal. It was a ridiculous, just a ridiculous slant towards the Tampa team. Everything the Blackhawks did was poorly executed. They couldn't dig pucks out of their own corner. When they did, they couldn't hit a pass up to the forwards. Even when they did hit a pass up to the forwards generally fumbled the puck or turned the puck over. And the Lightning they were so fast in that game. And the Blackhawks really had no excuse. Yes, it was their third game in 4 nights, and the second game of a back-to-back where the previous game was on the road, but Tampa Bay had just played in Minnesota the previous night. So they were also on the back end of a back-to-back, and
it really felt like there were like a minute long stretches where the Blackhawks didn't even touch the puck. It was all Lightning possession the whole period.
Yeah, and when the Blackhawks did touch the puck, it was basically back on a Tampa stick within 5 seconds. It was just, there was turnovers, there was bad passes, there was guys being a little lazy. I mean, just everything that you can imagine going wrong went wrong. And it was complete and utter domination. It ended up being an NHL record for the number of shots in a period, which I think kind of speaks for itself. And things really didn't get much better in the third period. It kind of shocking. The score ended up actually being 6-3. The Blackhawks did get a couple of goals in the third period, but it was just a slaughter, and very little redeemable qualities out of it. Really only a couple of players even deemed mentioning. One was actually Cam Ward. You'd think, oh boy, he had a bad game, but considering the number of shots that the Lightning had and just the pressure he was under all night, the score could have been a lot worse if he had a bad game. But he actually, I'm not going to say it was a stellar game, but he certainly played a strong game and made a lot of really difficult saves. And it's one of those games where it really could have been 10-1. But he at least kept it from being a complete blowout on the scoreboard, even if it was a complete embarrassment for the team. The other guy who actually played a good game, which was really his first good game of the year, was Brandon Saad. There was a lot more energy from him. There was a lot more confidence as well. When he got the puck, he kept the puck. And when he kept the puck, he wasn't just skating around in the corner. He was going to the net. And wasn't really, it didn't really pay off in the game as far as on the scoreboard. But it was definitely an encouragement. He was still playing, I can't remember if he was on the third or the fourth line. He had been demoted down to the fourth line earlier in the week. I think they actually had put him up on the third line in this game, but no, I think he was still in the fourth. He was still in the fourth. And yeah, he didn't play much, but when he did play, played really well. And he at least was able to, oh, and I guess I should mention too, Alexander Fortin did end up getting his first career NHL goal in that game on a breakaway in the first period. That's why the score was 1-1 after the first period. Was Fortin did make a really nice effort on that breakaway and made a nice move to get that goal. But Saad was really the only forward that really made much of a positive impression in the game. And then, like I said, it did end up carrying over, which was really nice to see, because last night, 2 nights after that Tampa debacle, they took on kind of the complete opposite of the Lightning. The Lightning are a very fast team with that can dominate possession and get a lot of shots on goal. And the Ducks, on the other hand, are a very slow team who pretty much get outshot every night, and they really only have a winning record because they have a terrific goalie in John Gibson. And Gibson didn't play great in this one, but he was certainly not bad. It was just a nice game for the Blackhawks. It was a great rebound effort for the team. I think quite obviously they were embarrassed by their performance on Sunday night, and they did what you want to see in those situations. They responded with an all-around effort, really. Crawford came back into net and was once again fantastic. But the big thing was the Blackhawks played their puck possession game. They did a lot of cycling in the offensive zone, but not just that. They had guys going to the front of the net and willing to pay a price. On the top of that list was Brandon Saad, who ended up coming away with a pair of goals, his first 2 goals of the year. I think that's going to end up being a big boost for this team. Obviously, last year didn't go the way anyone wanted, and the beginning of this year did not start off well for Saad either. But he responded to his demotion in the same manner where the team responded to their loss against Tampa. That next night out, he played well against Tampa, and then in this game, he got bumped back up to the second line, this time with Anisimov and Kane rather than Schmaltz and Kane, and he was rewarded for he kept up that same energy that he had against the Lightning, and like I said, rewarded with 2 goals, which hopefully can give him a confidence boost going forward, and he can hopefully maintain that edge for a while. That's obviously been a concern with Saad for a long time, is just how often he plays with passion and plays with confidence and plays with that willingness to go to the front of the net. And hopefully this, can actually carry over for a while. The other big positives from this game was the play of the defense. Keith and Jokiharju were pretty good. Wasn't their best game of the year, but they were solid. But I thought it was a really good game for Gustafsson and Seabrook. The one non-Brandon Saad goal was very much set up by Gustafsson, with obviously a big helping hand from Patrick Kane. There was a really nice passing plays to get up the ice, and then Gustafsson came wide open in the offensive zone and looked like he was lining up a shot, and just put together a filthy shot pass over to Kane that had everybody looking. The goalie went down, all the defensemen reacted as if a shot was coming, and it just left Kane wide open on the backside there, and he buried a one-timer. That gave the Hawks a 2-1 lead in the game, and then Saad added an empty netter at the end. But yeah, so Gustafsson played with a lot of confidence in the game, was really driving play. Seabrook partnered up with him pretty well. And then, again, they weren't great, but I think Jan Ruda and Brandon Manning, who had actually been scratched the previous 2 games, he re-entered the lineup, and there were a couple of plays where I was still banging my head against the wall watching him, like, what are you doing? But
there weren't
other than
any,
a couple of those moments.
Yeah, there weren't any egregious mistakes anyway.
Well, there weren't any egregious mistakes in the defensive zone, which was nice. His mistakes mostly came in the offensive zone. He pinched when he shouldn't have pinched. He jumped up into a rush he shouldn't have jumped up into. But thankfully, Ruda actually had a probably his best game of the year, and that pairing didn't end up being a detriment the way it has been in a couple of previous games. So just overall, I think the defense played much better. They were retrieving pucks better, handling the forecheck better, making better exit passes. And when there wasn't an exit pass to be made, they were chipping it out and just made it difficult for the Ducks to have any kind of sustained pressure.
Yeah, and actually, the only really egregious defensive mistake in that game was probably Taves trying to hit Gustafson diving into the zone when Gustafson was the last man back, and it led to a breakaway for the Ducks, and that was their only goal.
Yeah, a little bit of that falls on Gustafson, and that he probably shouldn't have been doing that when he was the last guy back. But Taves has also got to recognize that and not make that pass. And if you are going to make that pass, you better make sure nobody's going to get it. And yeah, that was a bad play by Taves.
Yeah, but overall, it was one of those things where it's like I almost thought of it as like the movable object meets the movable force, like because the Ducks have the worst offense in the league. There's at least early on, and the Blackhawks' defense, if not the worst, one of the worst. And but it turned out in that one the Blackhawks defense came out on top, so that was good to see.
Yeah. Like I said, I think the entire team responded well to that embarrassment against Tampa, because it wasn't just the defensemen; the forwards were also playing well, and not just playing well in the offensive zone. They played a full ice game. It was the most complete effort we've seen from the team all year, and so that leaves the Hawks with a 5-2-2 record after 9 games, which in any other division would put them either in sole possession of first place or in one of the divisions tied for first place. However, the Blackhawks, of course, play in the most stacked division in the NHL, and they are currently in 4th place. That is good enough for the first wild card spot, but they are a couple of points off the pace in the division. So not a big concern. It's very likely that 5 of the Western Conference playoff teams are going to come from the Central, and only 3 from the Pacific. And right now the Blackhawks are in 4th and are in good position. And it's despite a couple of poor efforts from the team and a little bit of luck on their side. At the beginning of the year, I think the playoffs were a big question mark as far as a realistic goal for this team. So much of it hinged on the return of Crawford, and when exactly that would occur, and when it did, what he would look like when he got back. And thankfully, they treaded water while he was gone. He got back quick, and at least so far, he looks like the Corey Crawford of old. I don't really see any loss of skill on his part. He is playing fantastic. I think his save percentage is damn near 95. And I know it's over 94, but he's just been playing really well. And so if he stays healthy and gives them that occasional goalie win like he did last week against Arizona, I think things are looking up.
Only 3 games so far, but he's looked really good.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think a division title is in the making, and if the Blackhawks do make the playoffs, more likely than not, it's probably going to be a short playoffs for them. But hey, you get in, you never know, especially if you get a hot goalie, and we know Corey Crawford can steal games, so you never want to rule it out. And the Hawks do have a little bit of salary cap space to play with for the first time in like a decade. So
and they better be.
They are playing well at the deadline. They could always pick not just one guy up, but possibly even 2.
Yeah, and defensemen, I'm hoping. He's got to
Yeah,
spend it.
yeah. I mean, we still have, you can't see me on the podcast, the air quotes of the help of Connor Murphy and Gustav Forsling on the horizon. Forsling was sent down to Rockford just yesterday, and he's been practicing with the team. I think there's some talk that he could be playing in a game here in the next week, which would be sooner than expected when he was originally injured. Um, but yeah, Murphy is. You'd like to think that the better hope there as far as being a help to the Hawks, just because of his experience and you'd like to see them actually get some value out of that. I think it's a $3.85 million contract. So, hopefully in another month or so when he comes back, is it a month? I think it's like 6 weeks still, but probably sometime in December. Um, you know,
We've only seen 2 games of Brandon Davidson, but not much
yeah,
better
that's
than
not an answer.
Brandon Manning.
Um, Davidson, if possible, he's actually a worse skater than Manning. Manning has very little lateral agility, but he's actually got a little bit of straight line speed. Davidson seems to not have any straight line speed or any lateral agility. I think he's a little more responsible with the puck. He's probably going to make fewer bonehead mistakes, but he's not going to be in a position to make any plays. Whereas with Manning, at least there's a little bit of hope for that. I don't know. I'm still not impressed with Manning. I still don't see what they saw in him, but I do. I still have a tinge of hope. I think I brought it up on the first podcast of a lot of his early gaffes that led to goals against could be chalked up to covering the wrong guy, miscommunications. We've seen the Blackhawks forwards be lazy and also have miscommunications with the defense and just covering the wrong guy. And Manning is coming into a new system. I hopefully some of that coverage in front of the net can be cleaned up, because if he does that, I can forgive a few stupid pinches in the offensive zone, which has always been a part of his game. But as long as he's playing physical in front of his own net and tying up sticks and taking the right guy, there's at least some value to him if he can do that. But as of yet, we haven't seen that on any kind of consistent basis. So jury's very much still out on that.
Echoing your point earlier, too, I just want to add on. Yeah, Crawford looks very good. I mean, it looks like he's in the form that he was when he was injured last year. And, the first 2 months of last season, he was basically keeping them barely. They were what, like a point out of the playoffs, 2 points
Yeah,
out?
I think so.
He was the one that was keeping them alive. And if he keeps playing like he's played early on, they do have a shot. So that makes you feel good.
Yeah, I mean, you can really see the difference between him and Cam Ward and last year with Forsberg and the set of couple other goalies that rotated through along with Forsberg last year. In that when Corey Crawford makes a save, he generally doesn't have to make a second one. He's generally very square to the shooter. He's very collected, and if the puck isn't absorbed on the initial shot, he is very quick to jump on it because it's generally not very far away from him. Whereas Ward and Forsberg, they're generally a little more haphazard. They're not always in the right position, and that forces a lot of those initial shot attempts that, hey, I'll give them some credit. They generally stop those initial ones, but they definitely suffer from rebound control and just not reading plays as well as Crawford. So they get they lose pucks in traffic. They don't handle cross ice passes as well as Crawford. And but yeah, I mean, Crawford really just he doesn't look like he missed a beat. It's pretty amazing, actually.
And of course, one thing in Crawford's favor was that obviously the Blackhawks decided that we're going to start you against the Blue Jackets, and we'll let Cam Ward deal with the Lightning. So that
Yeah,
also
yeah.
helps.
Although, hey, I mean, like I said, Ward did play pretty well against the Lightning, and had Crawford been in there, still would have lost that game, I'm sure. But, yeah, that's not unusual goalie strategy. But yeah, at this point, I'm still most worried about the third pairing on defense, and I'm worried about the third line with the forwards. That's where the Blackhawks' lack of depth really shows through.
It was kind of funny when you were talking about with Saad on the third line or the fourth line. There's so much alike that it's almost like it's hard to tell what is a third line and what's a fourth line.
Yeah, in most of the games, the Blackhawks have basically just had two fourth lines. A lot of times, I mean, when Saad's playing well, the Blackhawks have top six forwards plus Anisimov. But early in the season, with Saad playing poorly and Anisimov getting bumped up into the top six, they were basically running with two top lines and then a bunch of guys that were playing like fourth line forwards. And really, most of those guys are never going to be anything but fourth line forwards. But yeah, I mean, Saad he's a big key. You got to get him going. That gives them at least a seventh guy. And then, right now we're messing around with Fortan. We've seen a little bit of good, but a lot of probably not quite ready. But he at least offers something different in terms of speed. A big key for the Blackhawks, I think, is going to be Dylan Sakura down in Rockford. He was expected to make this team out of camp.
Is he still struggling down there too? I don't check the Rockford.
I haven't watched any of the games, but he is scoring at a point a game pace, which is nice to see. But I haven't really seen much in the way of reports of how well he's actually playing. But at least numbers wise, it's encouraging. But yeah, we really need him to come back up and lengthen that lineup a little bit. The other guy that was competing for a spot was Victor Edsel, and he has gone down to Rockford and really struggled. He was actually a healthy scratch down in Rockford, I think just the other night. And that is not a good sign because he was a little bit of a bigger body that they picked up in the Hartman trade last year. He played a few games with the Blackhawks at the end of the year, mostly as a center, but he really doesn't skate well enough for that position. And at the end of the year, they sent him down to Rockford and they moved him to wing. And he was a contributor for them quite a bit in their long playoff run down there in Rockford last year. And there was a lot of encouragement coming into the year because Edsel, not only is he a bigger body, and yeah, he's not going to be a power forward. He doesn't really play with physicality, but he at least gives you a little bit of hope that he could play a little bit in front of the net. But what he brings is an NHL caliber shot, really heavy shot. Pretty good accuracy on it too. It's the big question is he going to skate well enough to actually get open at the NHL level to unleash that shot on a consistent basis? And at least so far, the answer appears to be no, but he's still a young player. I saw an interview with him where they were talking to him and he was like, yeah, it's been a little bit of an adjustment, and he's saying all the right things after getting scratched in Rockford, and hopefully he can make a turnaround because at least one of him or Sakura really needs to come up here and contribute if the Hawks are going to have much hope. So yeah, and then the other nice thing, I know a lot of fans are mad about it, in that Nick Schmaltz has been, I guess, slightly demoted. He's kind of bounced between the second and the third line quite a bit, but the bigger news is he's actually been playing right wing the last couple of games as opposed to center. And I know for a lot of people, they see that and they're like, oh, this is this guy that's supposed to be, their second line center. He's potentially a replacement for Taves as a first line center at some point. But honestly, to me, his game, and it's not just the face-off thing. I mean, we all know he's just brutal in the face-off circle. He's just dreadful there. Always has been. And I actually think that that's probably not something that will continue. At some point, he's strong enough. He's quick enough. He should be able to figure that out at some point. That's not my concern long term, but he really just, to me, he plays better as a playmaking winger, very much like Patrick Kane. His effort level, kind of like Saad, kind of comes and goes a little bit. We see the great back checks out of him usually once or twice a game where he strips a puck and heads back the other way. But those are more bursts from him rather than sustained effort levels.
You also want to see, like, if he's on the wing, maybe he will be more. I don't want to say his way he plays is always going to be somewhat passive, but you hope on the wing he'll be encouraged to shoot more.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely going to be more of a pass first than a shooter. I mean, even Patrick Kane was that way for years before he kind of became more well-rounded. And you hope Schmaltz kind of develops along that same path. But honestly, not just the move to wing is going to help him. I'm glad they got him away from Kane. I know there are instances where him and Kane kind of do the Kane-Panarin combo that we saw where they dominate the puck and they've got it on a string and keep possession for a long time. But unlike Panarin, who was willing to shoot at any, at the drop of a hat, Schmaltz defers way too much to Kane. His natural tendency is to pass to anyone, but when he gets it with Kane, all he does is pass it to Kane. He gets too locked in on it, and I don't like it. My preference is to one day see Schmaltz reunited with Taves, actually. I think they played very well together 2 years ago. And I think it would help Taves out tremendously to have somebody with Schmaltz's speed and puck possession abilities on that line. Right now, obviously, that first line's playing amazing, and there's no reason to break it up. I'm not advocating for that right now. But at some point, that line, it's going to have an adjustment. And, we know Quenneville, after all these years, it's just a matter of time. But yeah, I'd like to see.
Would you put DeBrincat? Would it be DeBrincat, Schmaltz, and Taves would be your idea? Then
yeah, that would be my preference. And then because Cahoon is actually a natural centerman, and I would actually like to see Cahoon. Preferably, you give him a third line and see how he does with it. That's the way I would start it off. Was put Anisimov with Kane and figure out some winger for them. I guess it would probably be Saad, but maybe not. And then let Cahoon run the third line from the center spot. Maybe by that time Sakura's up. I don't know. But I'd like to see Cahoon in that role more as a, because he's got really slick hands, and he can get some possession moving. And I'd like to see him less against the top defensive pairings that Taves sees. I'd like to see him try to match him up against some lesser opponents and see if he can maybe translate that to some success. If Victor Edsel ever figures things out and gets back up here, somebody like that who has a big shot, um, where you pair him up with somebody like Cahoon, a playmaker like that in a third line role. And hopefully that helps them get a little bit of space against some lesser quality defensemen. And a guy like Edsel could probably bury some chances. But it's a Quenneville team. We're going to see a lot of combinations at different points. Seemingly the only combination that we're never going to see is Kane with DeBrincat. It's never happened. It happens in the preseason. It looks great, and then it never happens in the regular season. I don't understand why. I know Quenneville does have a preference for breaking up his top two offensive players, and at least right now that is DeBrincat and Kane. He likes to have parity between those lines. Maybe at some point, desperation time sort of thing. We've seen Quenneville in the past go to the nuclear option of putting Taves and Kane together, and maybe at some point we see DeBrincat with Taves and Kane. Either down the stretch run if they're battling for a playoff spot, or if they get into a playoff game and they're losing either in the game or in the series. That's generally when the Taves and Kane combo comes out. So maybe they just completely stack it and go with DeBrincat, Taves, and Kane. I'd love to see it, but we'll see.
Since we are already talking about Quenneville jumbling up his lines, let's get to the special teams. And the power play went through a lot of different looks in these 4 games, but they did score 2 games in a row, so that was good to see.
We're seeing some progress. I'm assuming it was probably the Tampa game. I don't know. I'm getting right now. As I'm thinking back, I might be getting confused. There was one game in there where the power play was just a complete embarrassment. I'm pretty sure it was the Tampa game where the opposition was just getting 2-on-1s while the Blackhawks were on the power play just at will, because the Blackhawks could not enter the zone. They could not. They were getting stood up the blue line. Just the normal problems that we talk about every week. It was just the nightmare scenario. And but other than that one game, they've been getting a couple of opportunities per game, and there's generally one where it goes really poorly. But then there's generally one or two where, there's 30 or 40 seconds of decent power play time involved. And like you said, a lot of the combos are getting mixed up. I think last week we talked about Jokiharju getting a chance on the power play. That's not happening anymore. They've gone back to Seabrook on that unit.
You wonder in that case, is it more of, I think they wonder if they thought they were putting too much on Jokiharju's plate.
I think it's possible. He did get off to a good start, but there has been a couple of games where he wasn't quite as good. I think I had brought it up earlier in the year. I didn't necessarily want him on the power play at the beginning of the year. I wanted him to get his feet wet 5-on-5 before they kind of overburdened him with anything. So I guess when he was playing well, it was worth a try to get him in there and see if he could, provide a catalyst to that power play. But honestly, he didn't really do much while he was on there.
What I'm kind of hoping for now is that what we've seen a little bit is I'm hoping eventually Gustafsson is the quarterback on the top unit, because his offensive skills are really starting to come through these recent games.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings on that. Mostly because, for better or for worse, Patrick Kane is going to be the quarterback on the first power play unit, and the unit is probably best off having a right-handed defenseman playing with Kane in that role, the setting up for one-timers, which is why you're kind of seeing Seabrook and Yoki Haru kind of trade off in that spot. I think best case scenario, you do have a righty with Kane. And then on top of that, I do kind of like the idea of Gustafson on the second unit, giving them somebody that can actually enter the zone, make a good pass, get them in there with some speed. It hasn't actually translated well so far, but I do sense Gustafson kind of every game. He seems to be playing with a little more confidence, playing a little less out of control, and a little more. I guess I guess I'd have to kind of draw the line between being confident with the puck and being aggressive with the puck. And when he's at his worst, he's being aggressive. And when he's at his best, he's being confident. And I don't know if I'm stating that very clearly, but there's a line where you can push the puck too much. You can look for passes that aren't there. I mean, we see that with Schmaltz. We see that with a couple of young players. And Gustafson is kind of like that, where there are times he's forcing things that he shouldn't. And at least right now, I think he is starting to kind of figure out, okay, these are a few of the things that I can't do. And I'm hoping he's kind of settling in to, a nice offensive defenseman role here. And yeah, I don't mind having him on that second unit. I'd actually like to see either Cahoon or Schmaltz there with him. Somebody that's another kind of playmaker. And yeah, I don't know. Honestly, it may sound dumb, to criticize a great player like Kane, but he's not a great power play guy. He's at his best when you're on the rush and he's finding trailers on plays. He's making cross ice passes, or on 5-on-5 when you're in the offensive zone and you're cycling the puck and there's a lot of movement and guys are chasing him. He can make quick moves that can shake defenders and find open guys that are cutting to the net and stuff. Those are his strengths. His strengths are not when people are laying off of him. When he's running the power play, the defensemen, they just hang back and cover the passing lanes. And Kane isn't very aggressive at taking the puck and shooting it from those positions.
It's been a problem with the Blackhawks power play for a long
years.
time too. It's very passive, and it's just not aggressive. They try to make the fancy play too much.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I think part of that is that with a player like Kane, you think, oh, we have to have him out there and we have to run it through him. But he's decent as a power play guy. And there are going to be times where he makes that beautiful, perfect play. And you're like, yeah, see, that's what we need more often. But it's just not a great strength for him. And unfortunately, when he's out there, other guys defer to him. And that's also a problem. And, it's just one of those unsolvable things, really. I obviously they can get to a competent level. But I just don't see them ever being a top power play unit with the way that they kind of run things through him on that. But yeah, I'll take competent at this point. Just not turning the puck over at the blue line 3 times every power play would be a great start.
Yeah, that would be just
let's cut that out. We cut that out, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, don't make it look like the other team is on the power play.
Yes,
you're on the power play.
Yeah, the other team should not get more scoring chances than you do.
Yeah, and as for the penalty kill, It is. It hasn't been great, but I guess that's
The
kind of
numbers have
reflective of
been
the season.
awful, but honestly, I don't think they're playing poorly on the penalty kill. I think they're being a little bit more aggressive than they were last year. Um, they started doing that a little. I shouldn't say that. 2 years ago was when they were really passive on the penalty kill, and they just got slaughtered. Um, Last year they started being aggressive, and they actually were pretty good on the penalty kill while Crawford was around. And then once Crawford was out, not only did the goaltending disintegrate, but I think the Hawks just kind of dropped back into a shell again and started being a little too passive on the PK. And this year, they're doing okay. That's actually been one of the places where Sod's been pretty good, kind of throughout the year. Um, Taves has looked okay doing it. Kruger's not winning many faceoffs, which surprises me.
Well, and also
Um,
for Kruger, he keeps getting committing penalties,
yes,
so he's
yes. The
never
last
out there
couple
for.
of games, that's been an issue. Yes. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. There are times where it's like, hey, that's the old Kruger, and he doesn't look out of place. And then there are other times where it's like, this is kind of like the Kruger we had 2 years ago, and I'm not liking it. And um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sold one way or the other in that he's going to be a problem or he's going to be a help. Um, I guess either way, he's only signed for 1 year. Um, and if they do decide to bring him back beyond that, it'll either be at a bigger discount than what we're getting right now. I think his contract's like 2.8. Um, or if he has a poor season, they can just move on. But yeah, I think he's had a couple of good games and a couple of bad games. And the biggest thing for him is he can't commit penalties because his biggest assets are the penalty kill and matching up against those other teams' top forwards. And yeah, he's never going to score against those guys, but if he keeps them off the scoreboard and just chips the puck down the ice and throws a soft little shot into the goalie's glove and lets him freeze it, hey, it gives us a face off in the offensive zone and no harm, no foul. Um, that's his role, and Quenneville's obviously okay with it, and we've obviously had success with it in the past. So, as a fourth line center, I'm cool with it, but he's got to do those things. Because he doesn't bring much else. So
Well, I guess I will go to my little upcoming preview for
sure.
the week's games, and of course, the funny thing is about last week is, you would have taken 2-2 with the schedule as it was, but of course, hockey being hockey, one of the ones they lost to the Coyotes and then beat the Ducks, so I guess it evens out.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
anyway, let's get to
Columbus was a
this.
good team, so I'm happy with that win. And they beat a couple of quality opponents. Anaheim, I think they're worse than their record indicates, and they have their problems. But hey, they're still right now in a playoff position, and the Hawks beat them. So I'll
Yep.
take it.
All right. Well, anyway, we're going on to this week, and the opponent's not nearly as tough
Yeah.
as the opponents the week before. They start out tomorrow, Thursday, when after recording this, and they're going to play the New York Rangers at the United Center at 7:30 Central Time. And the Rangers are in a rebuilding mode. They only have 7 points, and they have not looked very good. They did win their last game against the Florida Panthers, but it's the Panthers. So uh, then Saturday, the third time they played the St. Louis Blues to start the season. This time in St. Louis again at 7 p.m. Central Time. And following the theme, the Blues also have just 7 points, and they have not looked that good. Although I think they beat the Maple Leafs, so that is something. But
Yeah. They've been a team that a lot of people had high hopes for that haven't really delivered, at least in the couple of looks that we've had at with them. Um, I think they suffer from they have a lot of names and they actually have a lot of skill, but they don't actually have a lot of speed that I've seen, and I think that hampers them at times. I think there are games where they get outskated, and so much of the NHL is turning into speed right now. It's pretty amazing how important that factor is becoming, and I think that could be an Achilles heel for St. Louis, and maybe why they're underachieving a little.
It's funny that you mentioned speed because the final game this week is Sunday, and the Blackhawks return to the United Center to face Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers at 5 o'clock Central Time. So even earlier than the normal 6 o'clock Sunday starts. And sticking with the theme, the Oilers also 7 points this season,
Yeah,
and they are underachieving, but they've got a lot of talent, at least on the offensive end.
yeah, yeah. They are a bit of an enigma. 2 years ago they looked like they were finally turning the corner. They made the playoffs, and I think they even advanced around in the playoffs. And obviously, Connor McDavid is phenomenal. He's everything he was cracked up to be. He's the best skater. He's probably the most dangerous point producer in the league. Edmonton's has trouble scoring goals, but not when Connor McDavid is on the ice. I think I saw a thing where their first 9 goals of the season, Connor McDavid either scored them or assisted on them. So he is really the key. He drives everything for that team right now. And it's a little weird because they do have other guys that you think, oh, you know, they should be able to produce a little bit. But at least so far this year, it's kind of been a one-man show.
Yeah, so it's an interesting slate of games. Like the Rangers are clearly,
Yeah.
they're tanking. I mean,
Yeah.
they if they could have traded Henrik Lundqvist, they would have, but no one would take him. But
Yeah.
but the Blues and Oilers are two teams that are dangerous despite their record. So it's not like you should expect to win those games going in.
No, no, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you'd love to see them to be able to beat the Rangers in Edmonton, and if you're going to lose a game, you probably think it's going to be against St. Louis, especially on the road. But the NHL is weird. Hot goal, and you lose the Henrik Lundqvist, and if he's got a good game, it happens. Cam Talbot's been kind of a guy that can steal games for Edmonton on occasion as well. Um, but boy, yeah, both of those games against struggling teams at home, you'd really love to see him win those. But yeah, and then St. Louis, that's a division game, and like you said, it's the third time they've played them already, but this is the last time they're going to play them for like 3 months. I think it is. I don't think they play them again until 2019, like February or some weird thing.
Yeah, and they only
So
have two
yeah,
more games against them.
yeah, yeah, and I think they're both kind of real late in the season. They might be. I think there's one in February and one in March or something. I don't know. I looked at it a while ago, but yeah, I think the league kind of does that a little bit, where they're stuffing the division opponents at the beginning and at the end of the year, which is probably smart. I think most of the professional leagues do that because they want those playoff implication games, coming down the stretch, and if there's a battle for a division title that those teams are playing each other, and it makes sense. So I don't have a problem with it.
Yep. And
Um,
I don't know if you've got any other thoughts, but that can probably wrap it up.
yeah, yeah. No, I think we kind of covered it. I'm pleased with what we're seeing so far. The team's got a little better record than I expected, especially starting the year without Crawford. Um, I don't think they're actually as good as their 5-2-2 record. I think they're more of a 500 team with the way that they've been playing. But um, the one thing that I do like is they're an aggressive team. They are trying to push the pace as much as possible. They're trying to play an offensive game. They're trying to play a puck possession game. And they still do have, those star quality players that can, steal games for you in those regards. So it, at least so far, it's working. the lack of depth concerns me throughout the year. Like I said, we need a little help from Rockford, or we need Bowman to make an outside acquisition with some of that cap space if they actually do want to make a little bit of noise this year. But so far, I'm happy.
Yep,
Um,
and the baseline thing just to add is Crawford's back, so they've got a chance.
that is right. Any game Corey Crawford plays is a game that the Blackhawks have a chance of winning.
Yep. Well, okay. I guess we will end it on that note. My Twitter handle, of course, is STH85. And Michael?
MJ_Ernst.
All right. Well, thank you for listening.
Thanks.